Hello, welcome to Shad Life. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about this bike, and the reason being is because I've actually gotten out and rode it a bunch. I haven't hit dirt with it yet. I was going to plan on hitting dirt with it on Friday, but then Tritacoa Tops happened. Yeah, I know. I was at the restaurant, we were getting social, lost track of time, so on and so forth, and I just wasn't able to get out of there early enough before it got dark. And it was the last nice day for a few days. Not today, we got rain, tomorrow it's going to be cold, so on and so forth. Minnesota spring, but the good news is pretty much all the snow is melted, so trails will be opening up here really soon. But because I've gotten out and ridden this a bunch, urban riding, I got a really good feel for it. And I've even done, I did the video with drops, so I've done that kind of urban riding, even, hitting little hips and things like that and just having fun on the bike. Some stuff I used to do on my BMX bike when I was younger. I used to just go out and hit the streets and find stuff to ride, right? So I have a really good idea of how this bike rides, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. Is I'm a bit surprised about how this bike rides. It's a shocker, so let's talk about it. Okay, so I want to talk about how this bike rides, and it quite surprises me. One of the things I expected it to do isn't really that much of an issue. I can subtly feel it, and that is when you put a bigger wheel on the front and leave your smaller wheel on the back, so 27.5 rear, 29 front, called a mullet, you slacken everything. So I assumed that the front end was going to be floppy with that big wheel on the front, so at slow speeds when I turned it was going to flop around a lot. It's very subtle, but not like it doesn't bother me, which is pretty surprising because keep in mind I ride BMX bikes that got really quick handling and things like that. So yeah, it was actually kind of nice. And one of the other benefits of this is the bike is super poppy. And what I mean by that, if I'm doing manuals, I can get the front end up pretty easily. And because of that, I can also bunny hop it easily. So I'm able to bunny hop this. It feels like, of course I haven't gone out and measured, but it feels like I can bunny hop this just as high as I can bunny hop my 20-inch BMX bike. Which is not something I say about mountain bikes often. Like usually when I get on a mountain bike, they feel kind of big and bulky to me compared to a BMX bike. But this bike actually feels pretty agile, and it's got a 29-inch front wheel and a 27.5 rear. So like my DJ bike, that has 26-inch wheels on it, right? So very surprised in that. So what I want to do is look a little closer at the geometry and see if I can figure out why it rides like it does and as good as it does. And keep in mind, this is as good as it does for, like what I like to do on a bike, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to take it off the stand and let's take a look at it. Okay, before I get started, this is more level than you'd think it would be, considering I don't find this basement floor very level, but I actually put level across here and use my little angle meter, and it's pretty level. It's really close, but I'm not going to say that these numbers are going to be as accurate as the numbers that Steve does on the Hardtail Party channel. I'm assuming many of you probably watch his channel, especially if you're watching my stuff about hardtails. If you don't, there's a link in the description to his channel. Definitely check out his channel. If you like hardtails, you'll love his channel. He's out in Sedona, Arizona. One of the things I like about the differences between Steve and myself, we're very close to the same dimensions, except he has a shorter inseam and a longer torso, so he tends to like a longer reach than I do. But as far as like when we talk about terrain and what a bike is designed for, what he has to say is spot on. And I talk about that too, because even though he doesn't ride in this area, like in the upper Midwest where I do, he understands that some of the geometries and the bikes that he rides are better suited for like where I ride than where he rides, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty cool. I watch his channel all the time. So anyway, let's check the head angle on this bad boy. I'm going to do just like he does and do it at the stanchion because that is important. Get in the groove there. Okay. And kind of what I figured, it's spot on 64-degree head angle. So slack, but not like 63 or anything extreme like that. We can check the seat tube angle. Actually, now that I think about it, that's not possible because this is a curved seat tube and I don't have a straight thing. I mean, I can get an idea. 70.6, but it would actually be a tad steeper than that. So I'm going to guess probably about a 72-degree seat angle, which is laid back for a seat angle, but keep in mind the whole frame, the front end had to lift up like this with the bigger wheel on the front and the smaller wheel on the rear. So that's going to also slacken the seat angle a little bit. So 64-degree head angle to me is a more important number than what we're talking geometry, because I'm not talking about seated and riding. I'm talking about standing and riding. So I did measure the chainstay with its setup. So keep in mind, I have this set up as a single speed, so I have to tighten the chain. So there's a little bit of a gap in here, and it comes out to 428.5 millimeters. So 425 is kind of that short number, but 428.5 is a few millimeters longer than that. But one of the biggest things I want to talk about here that I feel like why it pops, one of the things you have to keep in mind is if you put a bigger wheel in the front and a smaller wheel on the back, you actually have a higher axle on the front than you do the rear. They're no longer at the same height, so you're actually bringing the whole bike back a tiny bit, raising the bottom bracket, you know, and slackening all the stuff we talked about, right? And so because of that, it's almost as if that first initial, and we're talking very subtle, right? But that first initial when you're riding a bike, when you go to pull up the front end, if your axles are equal, you got to get past that initial lift of the axle. And if you think of in levers, in the terms of how levers work, you've already got a little bit of a head start with a mullet. And I don't hear a lot of people talk about this, so it's kind of interesting, but I was thinking about it the other day. I've already got a little bit of a head start where the front end's already up a little bit, so then when I go to pull back, it comes up a lot easier. It's a little bit of effort. Now, keep in mind, I'm an experienced rider. I've been doing this a long time, so I feel these things. I'm sure somebody that's not very experienced would get on the bike and not know a dang difference, right? But I feel that little bit of change and so on and so forth. So there could be disadvantages of that. Like if you're climbing a steep hill and your rear axle is lower than your front axle, your bike it's almost as if you're going up something a little bit steeper than what you're actually going up, which is going to tip you back easier. So there are disadvantages. Short chain stays, having your bike already tipped back a little bit, are not going to help you to do steep climbs. So you're going to have to lean way forward and compensate for stuff like that. So keep in mind, this is going to be ideal for, you know, bunny hopping, pops, manuals, things like that. It's probably going to be a really good jumper. I mean, from the few little, you know, grass hips and stuff that I jumped, I could pop off them pretty good. I can't wait to get this on an actual jump, on some dirt jumps and stuff. Because I feel like this is going to feel good. I can generally tell if a bike's going to feel good for jumping. I think this will be a really nice bike to jump. So we'll find that out when I get a chance to get there. So the biggest thing is it's not what I was expecting it to be, and it's something that I actually really liked. I was like, I've been seeing all these mullet builds and people ranting and raving about mullets, especially on full suspension, and yes, I will try this on my full suspension bike. And now I kind of get it, right? For people who like bikes that pop and they're playful and whatever, a mullet seems to get the bike in all the right directions to give it that feel. So yeah, pretty impressed. So there is a lot more experimentation to come on this bike, but also with this mullet concept. I've got other bikes I want to play around with. I was actually just chatting with somebody who was asking me about this bike, and they were asking about the Jaffe, because I have a Jaffe and I can do a mullet build on the Jaffe and see how I like that. Jaffe is a bit more of an aggressive geometry than this is in its stock, same wheel size form. The bike I'm really curious about is my Rustler over here. I have the 140 millimeter option for the fork, and so I can put this same wheel, this wheel, in the 140 millimeter option fork on here, and that will make this perfect mullet. Of course, the colors aren't going to match because I have a blue fork on a pinkish purple bike, but I'm not going to care. This is all for experimental purposes. Another thing I want to try, this has the stock salsa stem. It actually came off of the Rustler. And I want to try like a 35 millimeter, maybe 40 millimeter. It'd be nice to try 35 millimeter stem. This is a 50 millimeter stem. I do think a shorter stem is going to give it that a little bit more front end playfulness, and can definitely try higher rise bars, things like that. All these things will play a difference in how the front of the bike feels and stuff like that. So there you have it. Super stoked on this bike. Like, no idea that I was gonna like it. It was my winter project. Now I'll be riding it here within the week or so, and I'm stoked on it. I appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.